Hey guys, I want to do a video today that's a little more on the serious side, and I'm calling it "Don't Create an Emergency If You Already Have an Emergency." And so I want to talk a little bit about that. That might sound a little bit confusing to you guys, but I think it'll make a lot more sense once I explain it. So something that just spurred this on, there's a really sad accident that just happened recently down in Colombia, and I don't want to go into too much detail on it, but people lost their lives. And so from what we can tell what happened, and I'm not going to start analyzing the accident or anything like that, but a helicopter had crashed on the side of a mountain, more of a sort of a meadowy area, and another helicopter was coming in to rescue. And again, we don't know all the details. He was hovering, somebody was trying to get onto the skids to get rescued, and in the process of that, he ended up flipping the helicopter on its side. He crashed that helicopter. He killed somebody that was standing nearby that was waiting for help. And so it's just one of those super sad situations where there's already an accident, which is terrible to begin with, and then another one was created over top of that because and again, I'm not going to get into this specific accident, but I can see from my experience and from the students that I teach, I can give a little bit of feedback on, I think, how this potentially could be created. And so here's my thoughts on it. When a emergency is underway, so you have an emergency, maybe a light comes on or something like that, psychologically we go into panic mode and we try and fix that problem as quickly as we can. But unfortunately, in that process, sometimes we create a new emergency. So let me go over a couple examples of where I could see this happening. So let's say you're flying along and an emergency light pops on. Let's call it a main rotor transmission light. On a helicopter, that's probably the worst light that you could get. And so it's a serious thing, but it's just a light at this point. There's no sound accompanying it, there's no vibrations accompanying it or anything like this. And so what you should be doing is immediately going in for landing. And I totally agree with that. Lower the collective, don't enter auto rotation, but very quickly go in for a landing in the nearest suitable spot, okay? Now here's where we run into problems, and I see this all the time as we practice this with students, where they're going to come in that last few hundred feet of their approach, and they're so focused on that light being on that they don't think about anything else around them. So they're not thinking about the obstacles that are around them when they're coming in. They're not thinking about their descent rate, how quickly they're coming in. They're not thinking about if they're into wind or downwind. And so you have a lot of potential issues. We can talk about vortex ring state. You come in too fast with too high of a descent rate, and you could get into vortex ring state. You could be downwind, and again, that leads to vortex ring state or potentially loss of tail rotor effectiveness. You could have an obstacle. You could have a power line or something in front of you, and you could fly into that power line just because you weren't paying attention to it. Or just a snag or something, or you're coming in for landing, and because you're rushing the landing, you're trying to get that thing on the ground no matter what, you're going to put it down on a very uneven surface, potentially hook a skid and roll it over, dynamic rollover. And so there can be another emergency, a more serious one being created when maybe, just maybe, the one that you currently have isn't as serious or imminent as you're making it out to be. So I'm not saying that isn't a serious emergency, having a main rotor transmission light on, but if it's not accompanied by any sound or vibration or anything like that, you might still have a little bit of time. And I'm not telling you to fly on for 5 more minutes or go to the nearest airport. That's not what I'm getting at. You're still going to try and get that helicopter on the ground as quickly as you can, but you always have to couple that with as quickly and safely as you can. And this is a big thing that I try and teach all my students. You're trying to land this helicopter as quickly and safely as you can, and that's the key there. So you're thinking about all aspects. Yes, I have this one emergency, but am I sacrificing my safety and creating a new emergency just by trying to deal with this initial one? So the emergency light is kind of the first one I was thinking about. Second one, and there's lots of examples here, would be potentially a hydraulic failure. So the hydraulics fail on the aircraft. If it's a lighter aircraft, you can still fly the aircraft with the hydraulics, but you decide to immediately land in the vicinity that you're in right there, even though potentially it's not a good spot. And maybe it's uneven and it's maybe rocky or whatever the case, And so because of this, you're going to create an even worse emergency by hooking a skid, rolling the helicopter over or something like that, where maybe you could have just flown for 5 minutes straight and level at 60 knots or so, and you could have gotten that helicopter down onto a smooth, hard surface, whereas if you screw up a little bit, the helicopter will still slide. Even if you end up a little bit sideways or something, the helicopter will still slide and it'll still be safe for your landing. So maybe just taking an extra second to think about that might have a potential to save your life there. So hydraulic off. And then one, I'm going to flip it now. One that has actually caused a lot of really sad accidents is low fuel. So your low fuel light comes on. Every helicopter has a different amount of fuel in the helicopter when that light comes on, a different amount of time. And so what happens, a lot of the time people go the opposite spectrum and they say, okay, low fuel, I could land right here, but you know what, the airport's just right there. Maybe I'll try and make it to the airport. So they're going to try and stretch that out and make it further than they should be. And they think, no, I think I have enough fuel. I think I'm going to make it. And they end up crashing the helicopter on short final. This happened a few years back with a medevac flight down in the US. And it was very sad to see. And when you read, I read the full accident report. It's a long accident report. And they talk about all the psychology of what happened with that pilot. He was texting during that flight. There's all kinds of things, I'm not going to get into it, that led to that accident. And so in that one, it flipped it. Instead of trying to rush too much, he took the opposite side of the spectrum and said, you know what, I'm gonna stretch it all the way. And I'm not talking about this guy specifically, but any accident where this kind of thing happens, and they try and stretch it too far, as opposed to saying, you know what, it's inconvenient, it's going to suck, I'm going to have to talk to the landowner that I'm landing at here, I'm going to have to explain the situation, I'm going to have to call for a ride, I'm going to have to go to the airport, get fuel, bring it back here. It's going to be a very big inconvenience, even more so if you have passengers on board, because now you have to explain to them that you mismanaged your fuel. But that being said, that's the safe option. You have to make that call in this scenario. You have to choose, you know what, I'm going to land in this farmer's field, or in this person's backyard, or whatever it's going to have to be, because it's an emergency situation. You don't want to create a new emergency which could potentially be fatal when you only have, in this case, a non-serious emergency. A fuel light, it's terrible planning, it's not good, but it's a very non-serious emergency if you look down at the ground nearest around you and just go in for landing as soon as you can. So I hope this video makes sense. I'm targeting this to my audience that does fly helicopters or is getting into flying helicopters, because I think it's such a critical thing. People that have experience and have seen these kind of things, such a critical thing to talk about. And another thing that's really important, I'm going to mention, it's on the same topic, and I teach this when I'm going over emergencies with my students in the ground schools and in the helicopter, is it's very easy to talk about what you would do in an emergency situation if that certain thing were to happen. So let's say this low fuel light came on and you just point to a field, yeah, I'm going to land there, and you don't think beyond that. When it comes to the actual situation, there's a lot of psychology that goes into it, and I've been there, every pilot's been there, and so you weigh out, well, how much is this going to inconvenience me, or whatever the case, especially with something like low fuel. The airport's only 6 minutes away, maybe I'll just go to the airport instead, or whatever the scenario. So make sure you're thinking about this ahead of time and making sure that you're pre-aware of what you would actually do, not just, yeah, this is what the book says, or this is what my instructor taught me, or whatever. What are you actually going to do? Are you ready to make that decision to get that helicopter safely on the ground as quickly and safely as possible, kind of trying to meld those two things together. So we're just trying to promote the best safety that we can in flying. I hope you guys appreciate that. If you do, give this video a thumbs up. Share it with somebody who you think would find this interesting, because as sad of a topic as it is, it needs to be talked about. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Share this with somebody. And I can't believe it. Tomorrow, so it's Thursday today, tomorrow, 8:35 a.m., I'm going to be on Global TV News with Ruben. And we're just going to be talking a little bit about the Epic World Tour. Super excited about that. And then, so I might do a vlog on that. I haven't decided yet. We'll see if I can do a little bit of filming there and stuff. I'm not sure. If I don't, the next one you guys are going to see is going to be of our departure on our world tour. So really looking forward to it. Looking forward to taking you guys along. And we'll talk to you again soon.